Harry the Hammer with further review by Housecrafters. Housecrafters provides complete home renovation services with one call does it all. That includes exterior home services like roofing, siding, home additions, and much more. Call 716-646-NAIL.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Further Review podcast. I am Jay Skursky, joined by Perryn Keys, the executive sports editor at the Buffalo News. And Perryn, we are back from Houston. Took a little longer than anticipated, but we had a weekend free of Buffalo Bills football following their Thursday night loss to the Houston Texans that dropped them to 7-4. And Perryn, I think if you're assigning blame, which is usually what we like to do in the media and what fans like to do after losses, you look at offense, defense, or special teams. I think this is a game against Houston that probably more of the blame falls on the offensive side of the football. And in this stretch here, 3-4 the Bills are in their last 7 games. I think that's been the case more often than not. And so the question then becomes, what's wrong? What is wrong with this offense? What is wrong with this passing offense? Dare I even say, what is wrong with Josh Allen? The reigning MVP of the league has not played to that level this season. And in assessing both the Thursday night loss to Houston, as I mentioned, and then that stretch of 7 games here where they are under 500, Allen has not played at his best. The passing offense, the weapons that he has, we've talked about it a lot. What in your mind, Perryn, is wrong, both with one game or the stretch there that I mentioned?
It is a hodgepodge of things that have come together to sort of, on one down, it might be protection. On another down, it might be downfield passing, receivers not getting enough separation. On another down, it might be Josh Allen trying to do too much. I think we saw all those things, frankly. And, of course, play calling and coaching staff and scheme and things of that nature. I think we saw all of that, particularly on Thursday against the Texans. I would encourage everybody, if we can do a little self-back-patting here, I would encourage everybody to go to buffalonews.com. This went up on the site today, on Monday morning, Jim Kubiak's analysis of Josh Allen and the Bills' offense in particular. And Jim, of course, as he always does, former college quarterback, former coach. He's excellent at breaking down game film, and he shows with designs and breakdowns and videos where on one play, look, this is on Josh Allen. This is on Josh Allen. Not let's take the Houston game. He more than anybody knows that he's getting pressured and pressured a lot. He's got to get that ball out in 1.5 seconds or less. In many cases. And you've got a man. This is not this. There were cases where it wasn't a situation where there weren't any receivers open, that they weren't getting separation. They were schemed in such a way where, say, Jackson Hawes or Dawson Knox was open on a drag, or James Cook or Ty Johnson were open on the flats, and Josh Allen would try to step up in the pocket or roll to his left and try to hit the home run ball and in many cases on plays where the home run ball was not the first design. If they're playing down a distance, in all likelihood, the first read was somebody, on a shorter intermediate route, and those routes were open. And Josh Allen, despite the pass rush, despite the fact that the downfield receiver wasn't open, is still trying to hit those home run balls. Why that's the case, we're going to try to get inside his head. Who knows? Maybe his thought process is abnormally sped up, surprisingly for a reigning MVP who processes stuff so fast. Or if it's a situation where he knows that his defense has let him down one too many times, and so he feels like they've got to get they got to get the downfield game going and not taking what the defense gives. But again, that's been happening a lot. You add to the mix, and I'm sure this has been, a matter of fact, we know this has been a hot topic over the weekend since the end of the game on Thursday. You add into the mix, Houston's pass rush is spectacular. But they didn't do a lot of scheming. It's just, hey, we're going to, the guys on the ends, Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. are just going to, they're just going to get after it. And they do, despite the fact that was the case. You didn't have a lot of tight ends or backs helping out Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins. And as such, you knew that they were going to have to get their ball out fast, and yet they did not. So, part of this is going to be on Joe Brady. Part of this is going to be on Josh Allen. Part of this is going to be, in some cases, on protection. There were definitely protection issues, not just on the outside, but up the middle in some cases and some runs. So, again, if it were one thing, you could point to that and get to work on it and fix it. But it's almost like playing whack-a-mole in some cases, where it's one issue and then another and then another. So, but they got to get this fixed, and they got to get it fixed pretty fast.
Yeah, the issues that I'm seeing with Allen, the troubling thing is that he's reverting back to some of his bad habits from earlier in his career. And, whether that's taking ill-advised sacks, not all, sacked 8 times against Houston, not all of those are on the offensive line. At least a couple, if not more than a couple, are on Allen, holding the ball too long, trying to make something happen. You pointed out that there could be any number of reasons why he's trying to make something happen. He's feeling maybe, pressured to score more because the defense, particularly early in games, is struggling. Maybe that's part of it, but he's not seeing open receivers. He's forcing the ball at times. I thought the first interception against Houston was not a good throw, not a good decision. He shouldn't have gone there. Yeah, classic case of not going to the right place with the football. So he's missing guys that are open. He's making decisions with the football that are a bit careless and reckless, which at times had been, one of the criticisms of him in his career that he had almost erased entirely from his game last season. But, the number is jarring. He has been sacked now 28 times this season. That is double the amount of sacks that he took last year. That is really hard to believe.
In 17 games last year.
Exactly. In 17 games versus 11 this season. So, yes, of course, some of that falls on the offensive line, no question. And they know it, right? Deion Dawkins knows it. Spencer Brown tried to gut through, a shoulder injury the other night. Probably shouldn't have been out on the field. He knows it too. But Allen's decision-making, his, unwillingness to take what's there, to take what's given to him, is troubling. And then you get to the sideline. What are we even doing? The frustration that we're seeing with his conversation with Mitch Trubisky on the sideline there, we don't see a lot of that from Josh Allen. And so to me, you start to kind of see some alarms start to go off when you see that level of frustration from the franchise quarterback. I think it speaks to some larger issues, whether that be with Allen or the offensive scheme. We'll get into that a little bit more here into the podcast, but Allen is a supremely frustrated player right now. I think we can safely say that.
Harry the Hammer goes to work.
Harry the Hammer here from House Crafters, and I am one happy hammer. We just finished this addition and kitchen, and it's beautiful. Look at this place. It's gorgeous. If you have a remodeling project in mind, a kitchen, bathroom, or mother-in-law apartment, one call really does do it all at House Crafters. For a free estimate, call House Crafters at 646-NAIL.
So in some cases, Jay, it's scheme, right? In some cases, it's the players not executing to their level. But if we're going to talk about coaching and scheme and putting together a smart game plan with the particular opponent in mind, well, of course, that goes back to coaching. And if you want to take this back a couple of weeks to the Miami game where the Bills went down to South Florida and frankly just didn't get off the bus and didn't wake up until it was way too late. Well, that's on coaching, of course. It's on different areas of the coaching staff, but it's on coaching one way or the other. And so, Jay, you've been around here for a long time, covered this team for a long time. You've seen assistant coaches come and go, certainly. The question is, with 6 games to go? Do I have that right? 6 games to go.
Yeah.
What do they do? What can they do in the now to get this fixed? We can talk, well, I'll put that to you, and then I'll ask you the question long term. What do you suspect might happen once they get to February, win, lose, or draw?
Well, as you mentioned, 6 games left. I think I'm going to take the long-term part of that first. This could go any number of different ways. We've seen this team sit in worse playoff positions fairly recently with 6 games remaining and go on a run. And if that happens, then I don't think anything happens with the coaching staff. If this goes the opposite direction, if this team falls out of the race, I think we're absolutely talking about, at minimum, a offensive coordinator search, and it could go beyond that. So this season, could go a number of different directions, and that's true in terms of the coaching staff and the future, quite frankly, of Joe Brady. And that's where we're at, is having this conversation. I asked Sean McDermott after the Miami game, and that was at the same time that Brian Daboll was let go from the New York Giants. Number one, are you committed to Joe Brady as your offensive coordinator for the rest of the season? He said he was. And number two, would you consider bringing Brian Daboll back? He shot that down and said at the time it was not being under any type of consideration. I frankly think that's a mistake. I think that if Daboll was interested in a role back here as a senior offensive advisor or some sort of position like that the Bills should absolutely bring him in, given his relationship with Josh Allen and the struggles of the passing game. I recognize that it would be tough, and Joe Brady would understandably feel like, he's got somebody looking over his shoulder, but Sean McDermott should not be concerned about Joe Brady's feelings. He should be concerned about fixing this passing offense. I want to talk about the short term, though, and the troubling thing that, to me, was the lack of in-game adjustments against Houston. It was clear that they were having trouble protecting, right? And five-man protection. Allen is hit, I believe it was a dozen times, sacked 8 times, as we mentioned, a single-game career high for Josh Allen. Sean McDermott was very clear after the game that Josh Allen is taking too many hits. Well, the quickest way to put your job in jeopardy, if you're on this offensive coaching staff, is to get your franchise quarterback in a position where he's hurt, right? And Josh Allen, we saw him writhing in pain after one of the sacks early in that game in the first quarter, and the adjustments were lacking. The protection did not get any better. So I'm going to start right there with the criticism of Joe Brady. Now I'm going to extend that beyond that and say 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay, Tyrell Shavers comes into the game. He has 90 yards on 4 catches, leads the team in receiving. All right, so you go into Houston. It's a short week. It's 4 days later. Where is riding the hot hand? How does Tyrell Shavers finish that game without a single target? It just doesn't make sense to me. And so, we asked Joe Brady about that. We asked him about the lack of in-game adjustments, which is an area that I will point out that I asked point blank to Sean McDermott, and he said, yes, we have to be better in that regard. And Joe Brady, to his credit, takes ownership. He takes blame when things go wrong. He is the first to point the finger at himself and to say that he has to do a better job. I thought, though, that John Warrow from the Associated Press had an interesting observation from that. When you keep hearing, I need to be better, I need to be better, I need to be better, at some point, the people who make those decisions and your bosses are going to say, you know what? Maybe there is somebody that's better. And for Joe Brady to continue to say, well, I need to be better at getting the intermediate and deep passing game going. I need to be better at protecting Josh Allen. Well, why isn't it happening? What is going on that's preventing that from happening? And so, I thought we could have looked back at that Tampa Bay game and said, man, they really unlocked something in the passing game. This is the recipe going forward. Well, 4 days later, they were not able to build on it. And I understand, yes, that you're going up against the number one defense, and we got to give the Houston Texans a lot of credit. But there should have been more answers, and they should have gotten to them a lot sooner than they did. We can talk about turnovers. We can talk about all the reasons that they lost the game, but the fact that the offensive coordinator was not able to better protect the franchise's most valuable asset, to me, is possibly the biggest strike against Joe Brady to date. All right, Perryn, and we should address the defense after that game as well. I wrote my observations. The lead to them was on the defensive effort, and the lead to that lead was that it was either going to be a story of redemption for the defense or it was going to be a horror story. And it ended up being, I think, a bit of both, right? Because 20 points allowed in the first half to Houston, 201 total yards, 79 on the ground, 5.3 yards per carry. Davis Mills looks like Joe Montana in the 2-minute drill, goes down the field, leads a touchdown drive. He throws for 2 touchdowns. He's got a 101 passer rating, and you're sitting there at halftime going, this defense is unacceptable, right? Well, what happens after halftime, though? They go 5 possessions, 4 punts, and 1 field goal allowed, and that field goal came on a short field after a Bills giveaway by the offense. So defensively, they rebounded. They gave them a chance to win. This game, in some ways, was almost an exact carbon copy of the Atlanta game on Monday night, in that the defense in the first half, unacceptable. The defense in the second half, well, I don't know what's changing at halftime or what kind of Gatorade Bobby Babich has given these guys, but they're able to figure something out in the second half. So there's some good, there's some bad. The bad is that they're fine. They're starting these games so slowly. The Tampa Bay game the same way. The Houston game, the first half unacceptable. But you do have to give them credit for what they're able to do in the second half, giving them a chance to win. They have to play almost perfect after halftime to do it, and they've honestly found a way to do it, but it's troubling that they continue to get off to such slow starts defensively.
Look, it's unfortunate that they're starting so slow. If you want to look at the bright side, you can say, and I think it's more than fair to say that Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott, who, as we know, is calling at least some of the defensive plays now, they're making good adjustments. I don't think there's any question about that. And I will say also in that first, the drive right before halftime is a killer. We know that there are analytics out there, and I'm going to get them wrong if I try to spout them out, but because I don't have them in front of me. But we know the analytics about and the numbers and the data about teams who score right before halftime, particularly if they have the ball coming out of the third, going into starting the second half, which wouldn't have been the case here on Thursday with the Texans, with the Bills. But the Texans score right before halftime, and that's a killer. On the flip side, I will say that in the first half, Josh Allen, as we know, gave the defense a short field. The defense held him to a field goal. Happened again later on. They had a short field. The Bills could not have afforded to give up a touchdown. Defense, straightened up and held him to a field goal. So it is a mixed bag as far as the defense is concerned. Listen, I think nobody's going to say this willingly inside the building, but I would guess that the Bills probably felt like going into the season, hey, if the defense can just be sort of that middle of the road defense, we can trust Josh and the boys on offense to pull us through in most games, right? Well, 16th in the league on opponents' third downs. They're 21st in yards per play, overall yards per play allowed, 5.5 yards per play. That's not going to get it done. 31st in yards per play, 5.3 yards per play against the run, 31st in the league. That's really, really not going to get it done. Now, again, it wasn't just the case of the Texans lining up and trashing the Bills, I formation, ISO, straight up the gut for 60 minutes. That wasn't the case, but one way or the other, yeah, the Bills, listen, they did enough in the second half. I think you probably take 23 points on the road in a short week. And not to throw this all back on the offense, but it was a little bit of a mixed bag, just as you said. So what do you do about that? I don't know. You hope that some injured players get back. You hope that the players that you have aren't compromised such to the point. Of course, there were some injuries that they're still dealing with, and you hope that the players who are compromised and still trying to play through it are better. And of course, listen, teams get better. What's the mark of a good coach? Your players and your team gets better toward the end of the season. When you've seen that with the Bills, of course, you have to hope that's going to be the case with the defense and the offense at this point.
The defense, the injuries are killers, right? I mean,
Yep.
Terrell Bernard is the latest to go down, and the team isn't going to use those as excuses, but we have to recognize that they are legitimate, they are very real, and they are impactful. It's Ed Oliver, it's Terrell Bernard, it's Maxwell Hairston at the beginning of the season, it's Joey Bosa not playing at 100% even though he's out there. That said, in their 4 losses, Perryn, these are the points they would have needed to score offensively to win the game. 25 against Atlanta, 31 against Miami, so we'll say that one, the defense definitely takes some blame. 24 against Houston, and against New England in Week 5, it would have been 24 as well. 24, right. 24, 25. The offense reaches those point totals, they've got 1 loss this season, and they're number 1 in the AFC. I think defensively, you would have taken those performances in defeat in at least 3 of the 4 instances, and then the Miami one got away from them a little bit late. I think Miami was at 16 points going into the fourth quarter of that game. So defensively, I think they're doing some pretty darn good things considering, maybe I'll walk that back a little bit.
In the main, for 60 minutes, they're doing enough to, with the MVP on the other side, yes, and an all-pro caliber an all-pro caliber running back, you think that's probably enough almost. I'm sorry to cut you off, Jay, but I think that's sort of what you were going for.
Exactly.
All right, Jay, so let's talk about playoffs. The AFC race, listen, we never say never, but I'm going to go ahead and say never. The Bills are never catching up to New England. We've been over and over not only with the Bills' inconsistency, but particularly with the Patriots' soft schedule. By the letter of the law, they're 2 games behind the Patriots, but we know at the moment the Patriots hold the tiebreaker and they have an easier path from now to the end of the regular season. And again, by the letter of the law, the Bills are right now seeded 7th. So they got a lot of work to do. They'd be in, but not by much. And they can't afford to lose really many of these games, if any of these games coming up, starting with Saturday against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know that the Bills, and you mentioned this last week, sort of in the aftermath, you had a story in the aftermath of that loss, that the Bills, sort of quiet as it's kept, have not been a very good road team at all. They're under 500 on the road since the start of 2023. And so, but that's what they're looking at. If they want to make it all the way through to Santa Clara, which seems more unlikely than likely right now, but if they are to make it all the way through to Santa Clara, they're going to probably have to do it they are going to have to do it on the road, barring an absolute miracle. And so where does that leave them? Well, that leaves them with quite a lot to do, starting with Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road at Pittsburgh. That's a team that's 6-5 and 1 game out of the playoff race, 1 game right behind the Bills in the conference standings. And so you go from there. The whole sort of part of and Jay, we can go a little bit long on this if we need to, but the whole sort of the issue and sort of the weird dichotomy of this whole Bills season and the Bills team is that, you want to throw up your hands and say that, well, hey, it's just not happening this year. But by the same token, I mean, listen, you've seen a Sean McDermott team get hot and go into the postseason on a hot streak. And we've also seen, I'm thinking particularly of the Packers. The one year they won the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, who may or may not play on Sunday with the Steelers. They won the Super Bowl as a 6 seed that year. There are other teams, I'm sure if we go back in our own heads, the Steelers won one, if I'm not mistaken. Either as a number 5 or 6 seed when Bill Cowher was the coach. The Joe Flacco Ravens, they certainly were the number 1 seed. They had to go on the road and make it through to New Orleans to beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And listen, if number 17 plays like he's capable of playing, you've made mention of this before, could be the best player in the world when he's on. He hasn't been on lately, but when he's on, and he can carry you quite a bit. And it's not out of the realm of possibility for a team to get hot. We've seen it before. And so that's sort of where you have this. So I don't know, Jay, I'll just say, with the AFC playoff race and with 6 games to go, the Bills currently number 7 with a lot of work to do. What do you make of all this?
Well, I make of where I start is that how big this game is Sunday. You need to have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Pittsburgh. You already have it over Baltimore. Baltimore and Pittsburgh are tied at 6-5 in the AFC North. One of those teams is going to win that division. One of them is going to be fighting for a wild card. So to have the head-to-head tiebreaker over both of them will be huge for the Bills' playoff implications. Really, there's 10 teams alive for 7 spots. Number 10 in the conference right now is Kansas City at 6-5. Then you go to Miami at 4-7. They're out of it. So you're talking about 10 teams. If you get the head-to-head tiebreaker over Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and you already have it over Kansas City, you do not have it over Houston, so you do have to worry about them. Then you've got LA and Jacksonville at 7-4 along with the Bills. I think very similar to the Bills in that consistency week to week for those teams is really lacking. I think if the Bills win this game against Pittsburgh, they're probably going to make the postseason. I would be pretty safe in saying that. I'm with you. They're not winning the division. The troubling part of that is that then you're looking at the possibility of maybe 3 games, depending on what happens in seeding and things like that. They could actually have a home game in the playoffs if they were, say, the 5 seed and the 6 or 7 seed won, something like that. So there is a possibility there. But 2.5 games behind the Patriots, it's not happening. And 0-5, Perryn, in the playoffs under Sean McDermott in his career, right? And 4 of those games include Josh Allen. One of those predates Allen, of course. So they have not been able to win on the road in the playoffs. They're 2-3 this season on the road. As you pointed out, they're 11-12 overall, dating to 2023. That's a jarring number to me. It's especially jarring when you consider the the Chiefs and the Ravens, probably the 2 most consistent franchises in the AFC along that same time, are 16-7 and 16-8 respectively. So good teams find ways to win on the road. The Bills have not done that. This is not an easy place to play down in Pittsburgh. There are going to be a lot of eyes on this game. I think Aaron Rodgers will be back. We'll see, as you mentioned, but this is just an absolutely massive game for the Bills in terms of their playoff seeding, but I think it goes beyond that in terms of what type of team is this going to be ultimately? We are now into week 13, and we quite frankly have no idea, right? Week in and week out, the last month of the season, right? You go great performance against Kansas City. You go, dog of a game in Miami. You go great performance, at least offensively, against Tampa Bay, and you follow that up with a dud against Houston. They've got to get off of that train. They've got to figure out a way to string together more consistent performances. The coaching staff has had time here with this mini bye week to kind of reassess things. The players have had an opportunity maybe to get a little bit healthier. We'll learn more about that as the week goes on. But if this team is going to get going and make a run, now is the time. And the frustrating thing, I think, if you're a fan, is that the AFC is more wide open than it's ever been, right? Yeah. It feels, right now the Chiefs aren't in the playoffs, right? Right now the Ravens are winning their division, but they're 6-5. They didn't look great yesterday. There's an opportunity that the Ravens missed the playoffs. Could you imagine a scenario where the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs miss the playoffs? I mean, it wouldn't be possible unless you were talking about it's absolutely on the table. And it's on the table with the quarterbacks. I know Lamar Jackson was hurt, and that led to a lot of Baltimore struggles, but Mahomes and Allen have played every snap, every snap that matters for their teams. That might be the toughest part of all of this for Bills fans to accept, is that the opportunity was there for this franchise to, in the last season of Highmark Stadium, host playoff games. And now, as you said, barring some sort of miraculous run or collapse around them, the opportunity to have a home playoff game, I think, is probably gone.
No, that's the case. That's the case. And, where does that leave you? Well, that leaves you with a harder road than you expected for it to be. And it also leaves, I know this has been a hot topic in Western New York. Well, take it however you want to take it, either over the last week, the last several weeks, or in some cases, in some ways, over the last several years. Are they wasting? Have they missed their opportunity, their best opportunity? And are they wasting, and have they wasted Josh Allen's best years? That's, we can fill an airplane hangar with that conversation, with that discussion. That's an entirely different show, and maybe an off-season discussion, or if things go really, really south here, that might be a discussion we're having in a week or two. But we'll see about that. But yeah, listen, it's a weird thing in my mind anyway, because listen, it really is a case of, hey, it's all there for them if they heat up, if they fix some of these issues, get some of these injured players back. But at the moment, it's also a case of, hey, man, you had a shot. You had a golden opportunity. And some of these teams you lost to, Atlanta, right off the top of my head, Miami, really all of them, if you want to be, if you want to walk this thing all the way out in terms of your top 22 players and the talent they have versus the teams they lost to, these are games that you should have won, at least 3 of them, if not all 4 of them, the games that you lost. And so, yes, this season to this point has been a missed opportunity. It's still all on the table for them, but they've made it a whole lot more difficult for themselves. And that's what leads to the conversation about, hey, is the right administration, so to speak, in place? Are they doing the right things by the organization and by the player personnel that they have? And are they wasting one of the best players, if not the best player in franchise history? Are they wasting his best years? And that's where you sit.
Yeah. Well, we'll start to get more answers on that on Sunday as the Bills travel to Pittsburgh for Week 13 to face the Steelers in, as we have said, a very, very important game in terms of the AFC playoff race. For Perryn Keys, I am Jay Skursky. This has been the latest edition of the Further Review podcast. We'll be back on next Monday following that game against Pittsburgh. Thanks so much for watching.
This is Harry the Hammer for Further Review by Housecrafters. Housecrafters provides complete home renovation services with one call does it all. That includes interior home services as well as windows and doors. Call 716-646-NAIL.